Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 362. This game was slightly different than my other Blitz games. This was a match rather than normally I just put out a seek command and I play whoever shows up, and I have the recording running, and if I don't like how the game turned out, I'll just dump the recording and get another game. But this was different. This was a match game. One of my viewers asked if he could play a game against me, so we arranged a match on ICC, and so there's a little bit more pressure than usual. I feel like I have to play a decent game at least, because I'm sort of committed to uploading this one. So anyway, I start off with e4. One of my that's probably my most common opening move. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. And my most solid reply here is the Ruy Lopez. I like to play bishop c5, the Italian game, from time to time, but those lines are pretty risky. Especially against a good player. So my opponent played the move d6, the Steinitz defense. Now that's an interesting move, and it's one of those moves you don't see that often because it has kind of a bad reputation. It's not considered the best way to play. But on the other hand, I've actually played it myself and played against it several times. Not in a over-the-board game, but in Blitz games mostly. And I've always found it pretty difficult to get any kind of lasting advantage against it, and I've had good luck with it as black, kind of as a surprise weapon. So people see that move, they think they should just be able to run over you because you're not playing correctly somehow, and it's not so not so simple. It's a pretty solid defense. Okay, so I play the move d4, which is the main move, and my opponent goes bishop d7, and I castle here. Let's first of all, I guess I want to note that it's not good to try and win the pawn, as so often happens in the Ruy Lopez. If you grab the knight and with the idea of trying to win a pawn here, it's not going to work because his bishop is already hitting your e-pawn and that's just hanging. So even if you grab a pawn, he will get a pawn back and probably also exchange queens in the meantime. So it doesn't win a pawn. What's the best way to continue? Just castling and ignoring the situation is the best way to continue there. And so that's not the main way to play. The main way to play is knight c3, which is not the move that I play either. I don't really have this opening memorized. And then knight f6. So knight c3 and knight f6 are, again, knight c3 is trying to defend this pawn and maybe open up the possibility of winning the pawn on e5. Knight f6 is counterattacking that. Castling, bishop e7, rook e1, and now there's finally some pressure here. At this point, I guess white is actually threatening to win that pawn now because this pawn is securely defended by two pieces and the king is castled, so no backlash from no backlash from opening up the center. So white's probably actually threatening to take the pawn now, and now so black takes, and after this, you'll see that actually it's only a slight advantage to white, so it's nowhere near the kind of winning advantage you might get the impression that you have if you read some old books about this opening. So an unjustly maligned opening. Okay, so let's go back to the way the game went. I played bishop e5, he went d6, I went d4. So far, so good. And then castling, just... I really didn't know the main move, and I'm just improvising from here. So, but castling is often a good move in these positions where the center might open up, get the king out of there first. So knight e7, and now I decided to play d5. Yeah, it's interesting. The engine likes that. So the idea with d5, I just noticed this is similar to a French defense, except in the French defense the pawns would be on light squares and I'd be going after the dark squared bishop, but basically locking up the center, driving this knight away, and then trading off the light squared bishop. And leaves me with the slight edge. The engine prefers actually holding on to the bishop with a4 or queen d3, or retreating the bishop to e2 and just playing with this big space advantage. White did get a lot of space, and this exchange does help black develop. It helps him get his pieces developed, and helps him by eliminating one of his pieces, which is often what you want to do when you're when you're crowded. You want to exchange pieces to alleviate the cramped position. Okay, but still keeping a pretty good edge for white, just because I have this big space advantage. And it's pretty stable here. It looks like there's a lot of different moves I can play that keep the advantage. Knight g6. Actually, it was his turn, but if you look at this now, it's my turn. So you see all the moves that I could play here. Almost any reasonable move here will maintain the advantage. So I managed to keep the advantage for a while. Knight c3, bishop e7, bishop e3, just developing. a5. I thought maybe he was trying to secure a square on c5 for his knight, although he didn't play it there. I made a funny move right here. I played queen d5. And let's back up. The engine is suggesting g3 is an interesting move right here. And that's a move that would have kept the knight out of this f4 square, which becomes a problem later. So definitely an interesting way to play, although actually thought about g3. I don't know if it's exactly in this position, but it's also a weakening move. It weakens these light squares. So I was a little reluctant to play it, especially since I didn't have the light squared bishop anymore. But it looks like g3 would have been a solid way to play right here. Anyway, I played queen d3, and that was actually just a slip. I meant to play queen to d2 and line up the queen and the bishop in a battery. Okay, he castles. And now I play a3, going after queenside expansion. Another note, I was a little bit worried about the move knight c5 here, but it turns out that's nothing to be afraid of. It's hitting the queen, but I can just trade it. And, black has the bishop, but he doesn't have the bishop pair, and it's not a particularly great bishop since it's just hitting these dark squared pawns in the center. So it looks like this would be a fine position for white, so no reason to fear this knight c5 move. Anyway, I castled. He castled. I played a3, going for b5 and expanding on the queen side. He goes h6, b4, bishop g5. And here, for some reason, I didn't think about taking with the knight. I thought about taking with the bishop, but knight takes looks like a good move here. We get to similar kind of position later, so we'll get to that. Knight e2. Knight e2 was a mistake, but I was thinking, route this knight around to a good square here on f5. And I wasn't too worried about his knight jumping into f4 immediately. But I should have been, because it turned out to be a major annoyance. So knight e2, and the engine likes exchanging the bishop. He played knight f4 here, and it also thinks I should be trading off the knight and not leaving it there. I chose to leave it there and try to live with it for a while. I still had ideas of playing g3 later and chasing it away. And now the engine is recommending this line, but it's just kind of an even position, and it exchanges off a lot of material. This is knight takes e2, queen takes, bishop takes e3, queen takes. So it would alleviate the black's sort of lack of space in his position and leave it with an even position, but with a much reduced material. I think black really preferred to keep the material on and press on for a win. So now there's a lot of pressure on this knight. For example, there's a threat of knight to h3 check, and if I take, then this knight is loose. So I decided here, it looks like it was the right choice, I decided here finally to take the bishop. He takes back with a pawn, and I think this is the configuration he was going for. He's got a strong point here on f4, and it's hard to drive away. And the move g3 here, which I thought about briefly, is just a bad move in this case, g3. Let's see. Well, the engine gives an exchange over here first. I'm not sure why. And then knight h3. And then g4. And then if I try to challenge the knight with knight g1, he can just take it. And I'll have this really strong pawn here on g4 controlling light squares. So good position for black. So g3 is no good. So I continue with my knight maneuver, knight to g3. And he goes b6. So I was thinking about playing the move knight to f4, knight to f5 here, but I realized he can just play g6 and kick the knight away, and it doesn't really have a great square to go to. So I went with this plan of f3, and I was thinking I could get my queen over here and I would help these pawns forward, but I realized there's something wrong with that plan. Okay, but let's go forward a few moves. He goes g6, so now my knight's definitely not coming into these squares. And not only that, he has room for his king to come up and rooks to get to the h-file, so maybe getting some more force over here. So I brought my queen over, and that was part of the idea of this f3 move, is create some space for the queen, maybe get the knight out of the way and defend laterally with the queen. But there's a big flaw in this plan, which is after I get the knight out of the way, I can never move the g-pawn because he always has knight h3 check, which is a fork between the king and the queen. So this was kind of a half-baked plan, I would say. And my advantage has slowly been dissipating because I made a couple of inaccurate moves. And finally I realized, yeah, I'm never going to get that move, or not anytime soon am I going to get the move g3 in. So I play h3 to, if the rook comes over the h file, at least I've got, I'll have to sacrifice to break through on h3. So black at this point decided to change plans, and he switches to the opposite side of the board and starts putting pressure on the a file. And now I played king h2. I still had ideas of supporting the h-pawn and pushing the g-pawn forward, so king h2 was part of that. It's interesting, though, I had actually done something good with this queen and bishop that I hadn't quite realized, which is that I want to play the move c5 in this position, and right here, right at the moment where black has kind of switched his attention to the queen side, he's no longer threatening so much on the king side, so I don't really have to make any moves over here, and I could switch my attention at the same time. I could play the move c5. It's always a move I want to play in this type of position, and it's just well supported here by the queen and bishop. He can trade everything off, but he's left with this weak pawn here, and there's I mean, it's only a slight edge for white, but it's something to play for, and his initiative on the king side has pretty much disappeared, and I can try and get something going against his weak pawns here and here. It'll take a while to organize that, but anyway, an even game with a slight edge for white. So this move, king h2, is kind of the wrong idea. And you see in the next couple moves that black's advantage starts to increase, well, starting here. So he doubles on the a file, and I decided to abandon the a file rather than defend the rook. I either have to, so the top choice of the engine, that's my other choice, is play queen b2. And then if he takes, the rook is defended and things just get traded off over here on the a file, and nothing horrible will happen. So I had a different idea. I still had the idea of pushing forward with the c-pawn, and I thought, well, I'll just get my rook off the a file, and I'll be able to push forward here. But this is a real positional concession. I'm basically giving my opponent the a file, and you'll see the advantage switches to black's favor at this point. So queen e7. Queen d2, just some maneuvering here, and now the a file is opened, and he gets his rook to a3, and right here, yeah, this is getting to one of the critical moments of the game. I had noticed earlier that this knight was controlling the square d3, and so I should have put 2 and 2 together and noticed that his rook can come over to d3. Oh, but that reminds me, there was one tactical point I wanted to bring up sooner. Right after rook a c1, I thought that he could have played the move knight d3 right here, and it turns out he can't for a very interesting reason, so I just have to show you this tactic. Knight d3 here forks the queen and the rook, and I had seen this after I made my move, and I was sort of sitting here hoping he wasn't going to play his knight to d3. But there's a defense here, which is queen d2, and he has to defend this pawn. Because if he takes the rook, I grab the pawn, and it's not the pawn, it's the queen. The queen has no moves. Every square is taken. The queen is completely trapped. So what's his best move here? Knight b3 and giving up the queen. Yeah, because I take the queen with check. He takes back, say, with the knight. And then I move my queen somewhere, queen e3. And so it's a queen for 2 pieces. Let's see, what's that? No, I have a rook and a... Oh, it's a queen for a rook and a piece. But this knight is kind of in trouble here. And anyway, strong advantage to white. So he wouldn't have done that. At this point, what's the best move? The best move is just to move the knight back to f4. So anyway, I was a little bit afraid of this knight d3 move, and it turns out, well, it's not a threat at all. But when he plays queen e7, actually... now it is a threat because the queen's no longer trapped. So I played queen d2 because I had spotted that knight d3 threat. And this is when he opened up the a file. Okay, and played rook a3. And now, like I said, I had been thinking about this d3 square. I should have realized that his rook is aimed at that square too, and played the logical move. You see the only choice to keep equality here, rook to c3, keep the knight out of there. Instead I played knight e2, just ignoring this, which I really didn't see it. Didn't notice this was happening until he played the move. This is one advantage, you know. It's often a good idea to gain space. And I pushed all these pawns forward and I've gained space. But when you push your pawns forward, it leaves holes behind. And you always have to be careful of these invasion routes where pieces can hop in behind your wall of pawns there. So I completely missed that. So at least, well, I found the best way to play on here. You know, my queen is, if I just move my queen away, I'm just losing a piece. So it's better to give up the queen for a rook and knight. And we get this position where it's probably a winning advantage for black in the long run, but it's not immediately overwhelming, and we can play on for a while. So he goes rook a2. Cancel that. Rook a2. Oh yeah, hitting my pieces. Yeah, my pieces are a little bit uncoordinated too, which is a bit unfortunate. Rook fd1, f6. And now, well, you know, I get a little bit of activity now. So knight c3, hitting his rook. Rook went to b2. Knight to b5, and look at this. So the engine thinks I've managed to get compensation here by getting some activity with my pieces. The pieces can operate well if they've got good posts, you know. But I need to hold on to these pawns and find good posts for my pieces, and this falls apart in a little bit. He went knight f8, trying to maneuver his knight into position, and I went bishop e3. It looks like bishop c3 is the move here. Chases knight around, or rook around a little bit. Let's go ahead and show this. Bishop c3. And where could the rook go? Rook to b3. Rook to a1. Yeah, my pieces get active. Everything's defending each other. The pawns are defending the knight, and the bishop's defending the pawn, the knight's defending the bishop, and I can get active with my rook. So this is, you know, a way to turn the tables. So I played bishop e3. Still thinking about this c5 push. It's a little bit too much of a one-track mind. He plays f5 here, and I pushed on with c5. And this is just a huge mistake. So this maybe is the last mistake of the game for me. I just failed to account for the fact that this pawn is pinned, and it's not contributing. I thought take, and you know, I've got that kind of situation we talked about before, where I've got a weak pawn to play against and active pieces, but I've neglected the fact that it's just not possible. My knight is hanging here after I take, so I have to backtrack here after he takes and try and chase his rook away, and then he gets an extra pawn, and this is tough to play on from here. So he kicks my pieces back and invades with the queen. Very good play from black, and gobbles up my pawns. I try and chase his queen away, but my pieces don't really have stable squares. I'm looking to find good squares for the pieces, so that seems like a good square, but it's not doing a whole lot right there, and it's not helping the other pieces. And when his queen invades to b2, there's kind of unstoppable threats, so he's threatening to come here and chase my bishop away. And almost anywhere I go, he's immediately threatening my rook, so I need to move the rook. I can't defend it with the bishop because he's covering that square. So where does the rook go? I've wanted to go here with the idea of playing the rook to this square, the b4 square, where it's supported by the knight. And then the problem with that is that he has queen e2, which forks the rook. The rook and the bishop. So this invading queen is just a really strong piece. So I don't think there's any good square for the rook. Rook d1, you know, I should have considered this. Something like rook d1, he still plays queen e2, but then I could go rook a1. So, you know, I'm not gaining much, but at least I'm not losing. You know, he doesn't want to repeat, so he'll bring his knight in and try and gain that way. So anyway, running out of time, I settled on rook c3, which oddly enough is the computer choice. Rook c3, and you know, it's protected there, but I figured queen e2 was still a problem. He played knight c5. Let's back up. Queen e2. Yeah, queen e2 is still a problem because my rook is out of the way, but the bishop has nowhere to go. And, well, I dropped my rook back to c1. I guess I just repeat moves. And then his knight comes in. Anyway, he played the move knight c5, and I ran out of time right here. There was one more tactic I could have tried here, which is, at the moment, everything's defended. I can play knight takes e5, because if he takes back, I grab the knight here. But I ran out of time, and certainly a well-deserved win for Black. Played a really great game there. So a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed the commentary. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and see you again soon. Bye.